So you're looking for a job and you think to yourself, what about a pet store? You get to hang out with animals all day, right? Well, in this video, we're going to tell you about what it's really like to work at a pet store. Hey guys, welcome back to Matt Keeps Fish. And before we get started, I want to apologize for the sweat, the sound with all the echoes, and the fan overhead. It's really hot and I broke my microphone. But let's stay focused here. What is it really like to work at a pet store, and how would I know? Well, because for the last 4 years, I worked at one. And over the years, I've kept detailed notes for this very video. But ever since we started training our newest employee, I realized this is not what you guys are looking for. You guys don't really care about wages and vacation times. What you're here for is to learn what it's really like to work with animals at one of the largest pet stores in North America. But before we get started on that, if you do have detailed questions, leave them in the comments and I will be answering them. But if you ask which pet store I work at, I can't let you know because I'm not ready to get fired yet. So the first day, honestly, the first week is a lot of computer work. You're gonna be sitting at the table for a very long time that first week. You're gonna be making money for it all, but you're gonna be doing pretty much useless computer work for just a very long time. Most of what's gonna stay in your head is stuff that you're learning on the floor. Once you're done that week of computer training, now you get to do the real job. Chances are, unless you were a manager at your previous job, you're either gonna start on cash, pet care, or truck. And to be honest, you're gonna end up doing all of them at some point anyways. Being a cashier at a pet store is pretty much like being a cashier anywhere else, except you have to punch in special UPCs for animals. And working on the truck, or rather unloading and putting away the product from a truck, is like any retail store as well. Obviously, and probably the reason you're here is to learn what it's like to work in pet care. What is it like to work with the animals? So let's look at what it's like to be on your first day as an animal care employee. Once you're on the floor, you'll be greeted by your trainer, which let's say that's me for now, as well as hundreds of different species of animals. And the fun part is, you're expected to know everything about all of these animals. But wait, you say, they didn't teach me anything about any of these animals in that week of online training that I had. Yeah, you're right, they didn't. Did we mistake you for a zoologist or a marine biologist? Nope, we just don't hire for those reasons. Which is great because it makes the job more accessible to people like you and people like I used to be, but it's not great in the way that you're not properly educating customers because you're not properly educated. From the very first day, it's up to you to decide what kind of employee you want to be. Do you want to take the high road and the hard road and inform yourself to better inform the customer? Or do you want to take the low road, the easy road, and sell to anybody? The choice is up to you. But I want you to know that either way you go, there's someone that's going to be on the same track as you, which means that there's also someone at work who's going to be against you. That opposition could come from someone who's equal to you in work standing, but it could also come from your managers. Regardless of the opposition and where it's coming from, it's important that you make the ethical choice. And this is not just for the animals, this is also for the customer. By striving to educate yourself and the customer, you're helping them to have a healthier, longer-lived pet. Although you may expect the customer to become very frustrated with you, this is actually how I've developed dozens and dozens of strong relationships with my customers. Relationships built on trust and going beyond just giving the customer whatever they want, but instead helping them to get what they need. By taking that first step in educating yourself, you are making your first leap in changing the culture around pet care. So now that we got the easy stuff out of the way, let's talk about what kind of jobs you need to be doing while you're there. There are 4 types of animals that you'll be looking after. First, you have your aquatic animals, which mostly includes fish. Then you have your reptiles and amphibians, birds, and small mammals or rodents. Some stores will also have cats and dogs, but for your sake, I hope you don't. Cats and dogs especially are a lot of work. They're escape risks, especially when they're rescues. They can be very aggressive, they can have a lot of health issues, and their messes are significantly larger than any of the other animals. There is also a chance that you, especially if you're a manager, are gonna have to take them to the vet in your own car. For a frog, this means that you put them in a container and you put them on your passenger seat, but for a dog, especially if it's a dog that's having bleeding, or it's throwing up, or it's having diuretic issues, that's also going to be in your car. If you have a hotel at your store for dogs or cats, the chances of this goes up exponentially. Now let's talk about the easier animals. Small mammals are going to have the easiest work, the most straightforward work, but it is going to be quite constant. Since they are endotherms, they work at a very fast pace, which means they defecate a lot and they eat a lot. They do also have the worst bites, and that even includes the reptiles. For less aware small animals like guinea pigs and hamsters, they're not really a flight risk, but if you have rats and especially mice, be very careful. To avoid these small animal escapes, make sure that any of these animals go right from one closed space to the next. So if you're selling them in a box, put the box in the cage, small animal goes in the box is closed. Again, hamsters and guinea pigs are a lot less aware, but that also means that when removing them from the cage, they're at a lot higher risk of falling. Then there are the birds, and they're quite similar, except these ones can fly away. At my store, there's been many of those animals that have had to be recaptured because they escaped, and there were many close calls on top of that. Small, intelligent birds like parakeets will over time understand how the whole cage system works, and if you're not careful, they will fly out, and it's happened for almost everyone at my store. To avoid this, while doing maintenance, always ensure that one hand covers the hole while the other hand goes in to perform tasks. Birds are also arguably the hardest to catch when being purchased. Generally, the best way to catch them is to either put on a thick glove so they don't bite through it, or use your net and trap them to the corner of the cage. Make sure that once they're grabbed in the glove or trapped in the net, you move them to a separate room to put them in the box. Even the experts make mistakes. Next, we move on to reptiles and amphibians, which I would consider just under aquatic animals in terms of complexity. Although policies often state that these animals should just be given pellets or freeze-dried food, ensure that they get their live food as well. It's very important for them. Being that these animals are ectotherms, their internal body temperature is the same as the environment outside of the body. The temperature that you offer them is extremely important. Make sure that the lights are producing the needed amount of heat, and if they're not, change them to a different wattage. One should also carry the same specificity to the humidity for the reptile. Some reptiles, and especially amphibians, will start to dry up if not given enough humidity, while other reptiles that need low humidity will have issues with rotting and respiratory issues. Oh, and of course, this is much more complex for both the high and low humidity reptiles and amphibians. Unlike the other animals that we've spoken about, reptiles and amphibians tend to hide their illnesses much more often, so it's important that you keep track of how much each is eating, especially the snakes. Snakes should be fed once a week. If they're not eating, it's important that people know about it. Although a snake kept at home may be fed more than once a week or less, at the store, consistency is key. You'll be working with many different employees, and if you have your own system and they have to learn that system, it's going to make things more complicated. Trust me when I say that it is best to have a universal system that everyone can agree on. Lastly are fish, and although people don't pay much attention to fish, they have the highest casualty rate of any other animal in our stores. This is not because fish are naturally weak, but rather we just do a very poor job at taking care of them. Unlike any of the other animals in your care, although a little bit for the reptiles, the environment matters a lot for these fish. And not just fish, but also the aquatic frogs, crabs, shrimp, and snails. Even more important than making sure that the fish are fed is making sure that they are not overfed. Too much food being left uneaten will cause rotting in the tank and blooms of ammonia. Ammonia will affect the gills of the fish, poisoning them and eventually killing them. Although illnesses for all other animals we've talked about are generally well known and diagnosed by vets, illnesses for fish are generally not well known. For my store, we have a sick tank, or what I like to refer to it as the rot tank. This aquarium is where fish go to get treated, but I call it the rot tank because what often happens is any sick fish go in there to die. However, I took an initiative at my store to start a treatment regimen for all fish in quarantine, as well as a separate treatment regimen for any of the bettas. Unfortunately, because of the way that bettas are sold out of cups, they are especially vulnerable to bacterial infections in the form of swim bladder disease. Unfortunately, even with my treatment plan for the bettas, progress is very slow, being that only one betta can be treated at a time. Now that we've talked about all the animals that will be in your care, it is important to note that it is up to you to make sure that these animals receive treatment if they're sick. Hopefully, like at my store, you have a treatment room where any of those animals can be taken off the floor, off the sales floor, and put in the back to receive that treatment. Now that we've looked at the trees, let's look at the forest. At my store, we have 82 aquariums. Each aquarium is about 11 gallons, and each 11-gallon aquarium can hold upwards of 30 fish. We also have 16 small mammal cages, each of which can hold 3 small animals, and I don't care to do the math on that. Then we have 6 bird cages, each holding a maximum of 6 birds. And then for the reptiles and amphibians, we have 20 cages, each holding typically 1 animal. And that is not to mention all the animals that will be in your sick room, which hopefully you have one, or your new arrivals room. Although you may have 2 days of on-the-floor training, after that, all of these animals are going to be in your care. And for those that eat live food, you're going to need to take care of the live food as well. At my store, we have an absolute maximum of 6 hours, but typically it's closer to 4 or 3 hours to take care of all these animals every morning and every night. This may sound like a good amount of time. However, you have to factor in that you are also helping every customer and you're educating them on the animals that you're taking care of. This is another reason why cats and dogs are a very difficult thing to have in your store, because the paperwork that you have to go through to be able to sell one of these animals is extensive, which means less time to take care of the animals. And then of course you may also be the cashier or unloading the truck or helping the manager or cleaning up the store, and you are expected to do that after you've done all these things. However, your focus should always remain on the animals themselves. Make sure that they're fed, make sure that the environment is helping them to be healthy. No matter what pet store you work at, your first priority is always the health of the animal, so that your next priority can be the customer's satisfaction. If the animal is healthy and the customer is well educated, then the customer is going to be very satisfied. If the customer is unsatisfied or even frustrated with your recommended proper care for the animal, then that customer should not own that animal. Remember, you're on the front lines. You make the decision as to whether or not animals become cherished and valued as living things, or whether they continue to be seen as decorations and toys. So, should you work at a pet store? If you're feeling a little bit of anxiety, that's okay. It's not for everybody. But if that anxiety is paired with the bubbling of a calling to change the culture and the way that we treat animals in pet care, then I think this job is perfect for you. As always, if you guys like this video, make sure you leave it a like. If you want to see more videos like this, as well as updates on my animals, subscribe. And if you guys want to see another video on the ethics of large chain pet stores, we're gonna have a live stream on that later in August, so keep an eye out for the notification. And I will see you guys next Sunday, or at work. I've recorded everything I know for this very... Thank you. You're not just there to talk to animals. Lollipop. That you Pringle specific at Matt's store. Good. Cut. Good.